Important for me. Okay, my first question, thanks for the interview, accepting our interview, first of all. My question goes to you. You were appointed 2007, if I remember
Right.
correctly, and one of the first things that struck the public opinion when you were appointed was that you were the first uh, person in this position that gave up any kind of bodyguards and all kind of personal protection in terms of the other persons who were in charge before.
Yeah, because I thought, but maybe the 4 years show that I was not wrong, that I was not under any threat at the moment. It's an assessment which is made by the security services in Brussels, in Belgium, and therefore I don't want to be constrained in my movement by close protection, but I must say at the same time that if there was a serious threat, like anyone, I would call for protection. And when I go to difficult countries like Yemen or Afghanistan or Pakistan, I have a close protection.
Yeah. Now, 10 years after the 9/11 events, how do you see the terrorism threat in terms of Europe? And I'm thinking about the terrorism threat in Europe, not generally in the world.
My assessment is that we are much less vulnerable than we were 10 years ago. As I've said in some interviews, I think an attack of the scale and the sophistication of 9/11 is probably much less likely today than it was 10 years ago. That does not mean that the threat is not serious anymore. Many of our member states still consider the threat to be serious, and they have different scale to assess the threat, but it has changed. It's a more diversified and a more complex threat. It's no longer Al-Qaeda core that we had on 9/11 with command and control, able to mount a sophisticated attack. It's a sort of regionalization of AQ with regional franchises like AQAP in the Arabian Peninsula, AQIM in the Islamic Maghreb, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, an affiliated group like the Emirate of North Caucasus. But that's one, and these are groups which are pretty dangerous in the region where they operate, dangerous for the development of these countries. It's no longer possible to help the citizens of northern Mali because it's much too dangerous to send development workers. It's of course more and more difficult to provide the poor Somalians confronted with a famine with food and assistance, because it's just very risky to be there. So it's a shame for the region, it's a risk for the people living there, it's a risk for all citizens going in these countries. But they wanted to target not only the people living in the region, but target the West and go much beyond their regional scope. And we've had several examples coming from AQAP in the recent 2 years with the Detroit plot, with the cargo plot, with the explosion, the suicide bombing against the Deputy Minister of Interior in Saudi Arabia, just to name a few. That's one set of concern. The second one is a non-insignificant number of foreign fighters leaving Europe. They are EU citizens or EU residents leaving Europe for Afghanistan, Pakistan because of the jihad, and or Somalia or Yemen to fight there, to learn, to be trained, to learn how to build an explosive and so on. Many of them are coming back to Europe and with the training, the expertise they have acquired. And so that's a challenge, because many of them are not known by the police. They are just flying below the radar. And finally, another concern is about the homegrown terrorism. People radicalized on internet or interaction with, let's say, an extremist religious leaders, or interaction with a group of peers, and who wanted to mount attack or a small-scale attack, opportunistic, where they live, not a huge one. And if you look at a magazine like Inspire, produced by EQAP, by Alolaki, it's a call for trying to mount small-scale attack where you can, and as often as you can. And therefore, it's another challenge for the security services and for the police, because once again, difficult to know if someone has a process of radicalization which leads into violence. So all this makes that the threat remains serious, it's more complex, more diversified, but at the same time, and that's the good news, these last 10 years we have developed a quite effective policy response to prevent, to better pursue, to better protect, and to better respond, and to reduce the vulnerability. So all in all,